Today I will read to you the opening scene of Byron's Manfred, a dramatic poem. And what's interesting to know about Manfred is that it's Byron's version of Goethe's Faust. And I don't know if you know what the Faust is about. I mean, you know the Faust, you know Goethe, everybody does know about that. In Germany, most kids are forced to read it, or parts of it, in school, and they hate it up, of course, because it's not the right age, I guess. And anything you're forced to read in school, you usually don't like. But that's pretty sad, because who is this Faust, anyway? Faust is a man who thinks of himself as being pretty much better than everybody else. He knows everything there is to know in this world, on this earth. He has studied everything there is to study. He has thought about everything a man can think about. And so one day he asks himself, so what else? I mean, what else is there? And that's when he realizes that the answers he cannot find in this world, obviously, because he knows everything there is to know in this world. So he has to look into the other world. And he summons up this ghost to lift him up to the heavens, to show him what else there is. And this ghost is really not too excited about it. So, but then he seems to have opened up something, a portal or a gate, so Mephistopheles approaches him then and makes him all these offers. Anyway, that's the Faust, and the Manfred is like that too. Another thing that might be interesting to know about this matter Byron was born 1788 and Goethe was born 1749. So there was a almost 40-year difference between those two. And another thing that's interesting, the Faust almost we might not have the Faust, because it was like this. This idea of the Faust was dwelling within Goethe a long, long time. Ever since he was a young man, he had this idea of the Faust. And but it was kind of in the back of his head. It was always there, but nothing that he could really put his hands on or anything. And then he met Schiller the end of the 18th century. Schiller was 10 years younger than Goethe. He met Schiller and they had I think a 10-year, it lasted around 10 years, their friendship. And they were really, really good friends. And Goethe, so they shared a lot of things. For example, the Wilhelm Tell. You know, everybody knows the apple on the head. About it was also a fight for independence in the Swiss canton. Anyway, Goethe was going to write the Wilhelm Tell because Goethe was the one who had traveled through Switzerland, and he had all these notes about the countryside there and everything. So he was going to write the story, and Schiller was so excited about it, but Schiller never got out. He had a wife to support and children to support. He was always struggling, making money and doing his writing and everything. So he didn't get out much. So he was totally amazed by this idea. And finally Goethe gave him all his notes and everything and helped him, and then Schiller wrote the Wilhelm Tell. And so that was one thing. And the other thing was Schiller was the one who would always get on his case about the Faust. He would tell him all the time, you got to do something with this, get on this and write it down, do it, just do it. And Goethe would always go, yeah, I know, but he never got around to it. So, and then Schiller died. He was only 45 or maybe 44, 44, 45. And he died pretty young and quite unexpectedly. He's been sick a long time. But yeah, that was a shock. So Goethe was really shocked. He lost a very, very good friend. And it was then when he decided to finally get a grip on this Faust and write it down. So one could say, if Schiller hadn't died, the Faust might have never come to be. Who knows? We don't know. So anyway, what did Goethe think about this young, wild poet just using his Faust to make his own out of it? One might ask. I will tell you, because I found a letter Goethe wrote to a lady friend in 1817 about this Manfred. And I translated this letter. I might have left out maybe 2 sentences because he would repeat himself. And so I just want you to get the idea of how the father master Goethe felt about this young Lord Byron. So let's see. So have a drink. Okay. Here's what he says. The most wonderful appearance was Byron's dramatic poem Manfred, which a young American brought me as a gift. This peculiar, ingenious poet absorbed my Faust and extracted the most peculiar food to serve his hypochondria. You know that Byron was a great sufferer. He used all motives according to his nature, so that none remain the same, and it is because of that that I cannot admire his genius enough. Whereas frankly I do not deny that in the end one grows a little weary of the gloomy embers of a boundless, rich despair. Yet the surfeit one perceives is always combined with admiration and respect. So Goethe was quite fond of this little Byron, of this wild and dark little Byron. He liked him a lot. He said to, I think it was the Eckermann talks, when in his last years Goethe knew, it was coming to an end, and he just wanted to kind of get things out. And he had this close friend, Peter Eckermann, and he ended up writing a book about these talks. And in these talks he mentions to him about Byron that as a poet he was a genius. But as a human, as a man, when it comes to self-reflection, he was a child. And that's exactly true. That's quite the accurate, basic, simple description of Byron. Okay, anyway. He starts another interesting thing, because this is another poet I love very much, and especially this dramatic piece where he's quoting this out of. So it says, Manfred, a dramatic poem, and then he goes on to quote, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Who says that? Hamlet. Shakespeare's Hamlet says that to his friend Horatio. And he tells him about the appearance of his dead father, of the dead king. And people are not buying it. They think he's insane, he's mad. And that's what he says. Okay. Here we go. So the opening scene, you have to imagine Manfred being, where is he? He says, at a Gothic gallery. And that's where the Faust is too. He's down there. This Gothic gallery, that's a good way to describe it. And brewing up his brew. Okay. Manfred alone in a Gothic gallery. Time, midnight. The lamp must be replenished, but even then it will not burn so long as I must watch. My slumbers, if I slumber, are not sleep, but the continuance of enduring thought, which then I can resist not. In my heart there is a vigil. There's a vigil. And these eyes but close to look within. And yet I live and bear the aspect and the form of breathing men. And so it's quite a burden for him to be a breathing man. He wants to be more. But grief should be the instructor of the wise. Sorrow is knowledge. They who know the most must mourn the deepest over the fatal truth. Yep. At a certain level of knowledge, or when you've reached a certain level of seeing, of knowing, it's almost impossible to engage in gayish, jolly happiness. You know? I'm not talking about humor. I mean, you can have humor, but that's a dark humor. It's a different humor. The tree of knowledge is not that of life. Philosophy and science and the springs of wonder and the wisdom of the world I have essayed. Yeah, he knows everything. And in my mind there is a power to make these subject to itself. But they avail not. I have done men good, and I have met with good even among men. Yeah, he knows. But this availed not. I have had my foes, and none have baffled, many fallen before me. But this availed not. Good or evil, life, powers, passions, all I see in other beings, have been to me as rain onto the sands. Dramatic. Since that all nameless hour, I have no dread and feel the curse to have no natural fear, nor fluttering throb that beats with hopes or wishes, or lurking love of something on the earth. Now to my task, mysterious agency, ye spirits of the unbounded universe. So, he is calling upon the spirits of the unbounded universe. You would think he calls upon them to enlighten him, lift him up. Whom I have sought in darkness and in light, yea, who drew compass earth about, and dwell in subtler essence. Yea, to whom the tops of mountains inaccessible are haunts, and earth's and ocean's caves familiar things. I call upon ye by the written charm which gives me power upon you. Rise, appear. So Manfred is pretty bossy. They come not yet. Now by the voice of him who is the first among you, by his sign, which makes you tremble, by the claims of him who is undying. Rise. The spirit. Spirit came within me. Okay. Rise, appear. Appear twice. Appear. If it be so, spirits of earth and air, ye shall not thus elude me. By a power deeper than all yet urged, a tyrant's spell, which had its birthplace in a star condemned, the burning wreck of a demolished world. A wandering hell in the eternal space. By the strong curse which is upon my soul, the thought which is within me and around me, I do compel ye to my will. Appear. A star seen at the darker end of the gallery. It is stationary, and a voice is heard singing. Okay. Now come the spirits. In Manfred, there are 7 spirits that are appearing now. And as we go, I will tell you what these spirits are. Oh. I hate this. This is a long video I'm noticing right now. Okay, we're going to read the spirits, 7 spirits, and then that's it. So, first spirit. Mortal, to thy bidding bowed, from my mansion in the cloud, which the breath of twilight builds, and the summer's sunset gilds, with the azure and vermilion, which is mixed for my pavilion. Though thy quest may be forbidden, on a star beam I have ridden, to thine adjuration bowed, mortal, be thy wish avowed. That was the first spirit, that was the spirit of the air. Voice of the second spirit. Mont Blanc, a mountain in the Alps, the White Mountain, is the monarch of mountains. Okay, I'm gonna have to have another smoke to get this away. So, he's the monarch of the mountain. The mountains. They crowned him long ago on a throne of rocks, in a robe of clouds, with a diadem of snow. That's why he's called Mont Blanc. Around his waist are forests braced, the avalanche is in his hand, but ere it fall, that thundering ball must pause for my command. The glacier's cold and restless mass moves onward day by day, but I am he who bids it pass, or with its ice delay. I am the spirit of the place, could make the mountain bow and quiver to his cavern base. And what with me wouldst thou? So this was obviously the spirit of the mountains. Now the voice of the third spirit. In the blue depth of the waters, where the wave hath no strife, where the wind is a stranger, and the sea snake hath life, where the mermaid is decking her green hair with shells, like the storm on the surface came the sound of thy spells. Over my calm hall of coral the deep echo rolled, to the spirit of ocean thy wishes unfold. So this was the spirit of the oceans. They're all coming to serve Manfred. Yeah. The fourth spirit. Where the slumbering earthquake lies pillowed on fire, and the lakes of, I don't know this word, bitumen, rise boilingly higher, where the roots of the Andes strike deep in the earth, as their summits to heaven shoot soaringly forth. I have quitted my birthplace, thy bidding to bide. Thy spell hath subdued me. Thy will be my guide. That was the spirit of the earth. Now comes the fifth spirit. I am the rider of the wind, the stirrer of the storm. The hurricane I left behind is yet with lightning warm. To speed to thee over shore and sea I swept upon the blast. The fleet I met sailed well, and yet I will sink ere night be past. That was the spirit of the winds. So what's interesting is that there's a spirit of the air and a spirit of the winds. The sixth spirit, my dwelling is the shadow of the night. Why doth thy magic torture me with light? Says the spirit of night. Now comes the seventh spirit. The star which rules thy destiny was ruled ere earth began by me. It was a world as fresh and fair as ever revolved round sun in air. So he obviously believed in this new science that had also been pushed by Newton. Well, it wasn't new, but it was popular at the time that Earth would revolve around the sun. I don't know if you got this, I can read it again. It was a world as fresh and fair as ever revolved round sun and air. So the earth revolved around the sun and air. I don't know about that. Its course was free and regular, space bosomed, not a lovelier star. The hour arrived, and it became a wandering mass of shapeless flame, a pathless comet and a curse, the menace of the universe, still rolling on with innate force, without a sphere, without a course, a bright deformity on high, the monster of the upper sky. And thou, beneath its influence born, thou worm, whom I obey and scorn. He's not a happy spirit. Forced by a power which is not thine, and lent thee but to make thee mine. For this brief moment to descend, where these weak spirits round thee bend, and parley with a thing like thee, what wouldst thou, child of clay, with me? So the star spirit is pretty much the spirit of the spirits. He looks down onto the other spirits for being willing to bow to this child of clay. He thinks, what are they doing? That's what I was thinking. So this, that was the spirit of the stars, and I kind of agree with the star spirit. Yeah. That was the opening scene of Manfred, Byron's version of Faust. And we know Goethe was quite pleased with him. And the other way around, of course, was the same. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to tell about Goethe. I need to get another drink. I want to show you my cup. This is Faust, and behind him, with the little horns, you can see the little horns on the head maybe, sits Mephistopheles, and they're riding on a barrel of wine. And I bought this cup in Leipzig, in Auerbach's Keller. Auerbach's Keller, Leipzig, since 1525, I think. Yeah. And that was like a pub in a Keller. Keller means cellar, wine cellar, basement. That's where the pub was. Underneath, you had to go down. And when Goethe would study in Leipzig, that was his place where he would go to party and to drink. So I went there and I got this cup with Faust and Mephistopheles riding on a barrel of wine. I kind of like that. So I know this is really unprofessional. Okay. Can't have a cup of wine with no wine in it. That is just not done. Okay. Oh, I was going to tell this story real quick about Goethe. Yeah, what kind of man was Goethe? Goethe in his best years, that was most of his years. I mean, just when he lived to be over 80, so during his last years he kind of calmed down a little bit. But Goethe was not a nice guy or a polite person. He was quite the asshole, and he could be pretty cocky. And he had his principles, and he didn't really care what other people thought. He didn't care about conventions or rules of society, or when it came down to his personal principles, they would always come first to him. And he was not diplomatic, even though he was part of the little government in Weimar for 10 years. He was active in government affairs, but he was not a diplomatic guy. And he did not tolerate any shit. And he had a lot of enemies, too. So there were two kinds of people, usually. Either his enemies, his critics, who would openly hate him, or the other people who would try to crawl up into his behind and suck up to him. So, yeah, that was pretty much it. And if you would compare him with somebody today, he would be a Trump. He is a Trump character, definitely. That would be good. So Goethe was born 1749. So at the end of the 18th century, middle end, a new trend was born, the trend of wearing eyeglasses. academics, the intellectual elite, they would start to wear eyeglasses to kind of enhance their superiority over the normal people. And Goethe really hated those Philisters, or Philister, I don't know how you pronounce it in English. Philister, I think, you know what I mean. He hated those, and he just thought it was ridiculous to wear these eyeglasses. And talking about him not tolerating things, it was like this. When somebody, maybe a young, ambitious man, whatever, would come to his house, to Goethe's house, to see him either as the politician or the official man or the poet or the writer or the scientist. I mean, he did lots of nature studies. He was quite the scientist too. People forget that about him. Anyway, in whatever subject these people would, come and ask for an audience with Goethe, maybe. If that person would wear eyeglasses, Goethe would not see him. He would say, no, take your eyeglasses and go, I'm not talking to you. So, yeah. He didn't give a shit. Yeah, okay. That was Manfred and Faust, Byron, Goethe. And I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Prost.